pictures on the screen, but I can't hear them.
And I
We are
can't see him
recording.
either. Okay, well, hopefully Rick will figure out the technology. And so we welcome you. Rick's been in touch with Charlotte in the last few days. So we welcome him.
Okay.
And glad to see Rick.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
I
Yes.
can hear you, but you're all we see is your face.
Yeah, I can switch that over. I was trying to have mercy on you.
Ah.
I first of all, I'm
There
on
you
my
go.
laptop, so I use my bigger screen, and then I just got back from the gym from a workout, so
I did too.
I thought I'd have mercy on you. And yeah, my audio was hooked up on my laptop, and so it doesn't receive, it just puts out. So
I see.
hopefully we're going good now.
We are good. We are good.
I just lost my whole connection. I had to go in and out twice to get back.
Weird.
Does that happen to other people?
Occasionally, yeah.
Sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
Annoying.
Um,
Okay.
okay, well, good
Shall we-
morning, and I think it is 11 o'clock.
Good at 11. You ready for the blessing?
We are.
Oh,
Let us begin. Baruch
Baruch
atah
atah
Adonai,
Adonai,
Eloheinu melech
Eloheinu
haolam,
haolam,
asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu
V'tzivanu
b'divrei Torah.
Torah.
Blessed are you, Adonai, our God,
God,
ruler of the world, who has sanctified us with your commandments, commanded us to engage in the words of Torah.
Amen.
Okay, Rabbi, we're talking Passover.
Yes, so I apologize for the fact that this may not be so easy to do. But what I was hoping is that you would be able to have two screens. One for the actual Haggadah, which you can put up on the screen, which you should have received in PDF. And the other for your, faces. If you can do that, that would be ideal. If not, then if you can take any Haggadah you have in the house and you'll have to just listen to the commentary. Is that going to work for everybody here in one way or another?
Yeah.
To some
Sounds
degree.
good to me.
Now, this Haggadah I chose because I happen to have it in PDF, and also because it's a pretty middle of the road, interesting Haggadah. The one we're using tonight at the synagogue is this one, which I can also send you the PDF of. It's from an organization called Jew Belong, and it's so compelling Elijah might stay for dessert. I don't know if you can see that on my screen.
Huh.
And Elijah, even though we used it last year and it got good reviews from most of the people there, Elijah did not attend. He sent an email saying that if we want him to come, we have to do something a little more serious. And I wrote him back saying, we have to go with the majority. And he's not even a member. So he didn't like that very much. And he said, well, my schedule's busy for the next several years anyway, but good luck in Sun City. And that's how we left it. There's, of course, millions and millions of Haggadahs out there. I just brought a few to show you. This is a mystical Haggadah, which I've not studied, but I'd like to. And this is the new Reform Haggadah. So, as you probably know, we used for many years at the temple the Bronstein Haggadah. Oh, look at who's here. Steve, who is that?
Oh. He wants you to introduce your baby over there.
Yeah, what's his name and or her name, and what does she do for a living? And
Unmute.
Okay, this is Doogie. She's an adopted little dog that we acquired down at the shelter. And when we caught her, or actually got her, she was like all full of burrs and ticks and all the stuff. So we had to completely have her shaved. And so she's much happier now than we got her. So this is Doogie.
How long have you had her?
About 5 years.
Oh,
Oh, she's a longtime resident.
Yeah.
and
All right.
Rick, if you have a dog, this would be a good time to show them.
No, we don't have any dogs or pets. Kids
Okay.
are growing up and out of the house, so we're living free.
Free agents.
And there's a message that was just put there from Nan, that there's a website called haggadot.com that allows you to create your own website.
Haggadah talking about your adult ed class, using comedy from Jewish comedians. So it can be creative if you have a family that's really not into the seriousness and wants a quickie, say, let's get to the meal fast.
Yeah.
And here's Lily. She and Skinny went to the vet this morning at 8:30. She thought she was going just to support Skinny. So when they started giving her shots, she's like shocked. Skinny, you want to say hello to everybody in Torah?
See Skinny?
Your chance at fame.
Oh,
Looks like they've recovered.
yeah.
Physically, but not emotionally.
Not emotionally, yeah. Mine quivers when we go into the car. She
Oh,
knows it's
really?
either gonna be groomed or getting shots.
Just don't take them for a ride every so often, huh?
Yeah.
When I got to the door of the vet, Skinny realized where we were going and he suddenly put the brakes on. And, they remember from a year ago. So this is the Reform Haggadah. It's brand new. It just came out in the last year. And you probably remember the Bronstein Haggadah, which was produced by the same organization, the CCAR, the Central Conference of American Rabbis. And that was edited by Rabbi Herbert Bronstein. If not, when you go to the synagogue, let me know and I'll show you a copy. So this one it's set up just like our prayer book, with the traditional stuff on the left side and transliterations, and then more creative readings on the right side. And this I also have not studied through. You could spend, a year going through these Haggadot. So what I thought we would do today is look at parts of the Haggadah. And if you can pull up on the screen, if that's possible, this Haggadah. And if not, just open any Haggadah that you have. And if not, then just try to remember what you recall being in the Haggadah. So let's just start with some general comments about the Seder plate. If not, you can Google the Seder plate, and there's a copy of the Seder plate, which is
What page do you want us to go to on our?
this is before page 1. It's right at the beginning. There's an opening page that has no number, and then this is the first page with
Rolling like crazy. I've gotten knocked down to 20.
Can you see the print on my
Yeah, I see yours.
Yeah, I see it.
I bought a high resolution thing. Stephen Bob had given me what do they call these things? The webcam.
Webcam.
So thank you, Stephen Bob. And that broke a number of months ago.
Oh,
And then I got this one.
Well,
Is that the same one you sent out?
so the one you sent
Yeah.
out, is
Yeah.
there a page number on the bottom of that page?
It's before page 1.
well,
No,
no.
no,
Yeah, that's not,
no,
it's not on
Different-
mine.
It's a different.
not on the ones that our PDF isn't.
No.
have that.
That's
The
a-
PDF is not this book.
No,
It's-
we have
it's
that
called-
book, but not that page that you showing.
Well, if not on the PDF pages, but on the actual pages, we'll go to the very first thing. The
It
very
says the
beginning.
Passover Haggadah, go forth and learn.
Right, and go to the very next page.
And then that's the end of that. Then it's my faith and learn,
Uh,
honor
Now, the
of.
one that we've got is got
Contents.
2011 and 5771 on the first page. Is that the
Oh,
same?
maybe it's at the end of the book. Go, if not, go to the very end then.
hmm.
There's two
Oh,
sides
yeah.
to the book. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Go to the very, very end.
okay, I'm scrolling up the side here on my iPad. There's 238 pages. You got to give us a minute.
Yeah, so go to
Yeah,
page 237.
237. 235, 36, table of content. No, it's just the table of contents. It's not there. Okay. Well, show us what you got. You got a Seder plate.
You got the Seder plate.
So can you find page 1?
Well, it's
Yeah.
not the same,
It's not the same as what you have.
right?
There's
Alright.
two
That's
sides to the
okay. I
book.
think.
So
I
let's
think
just wing it.
Yeah, I
No,
think
need
we're all
to-
familiar
I
with
need
the
to help
Seder
you
plate.
find it. So can you find page 1 and what do you have on page 1?
Gotta go all the way back again.
Well, there's 2 page 1s. There's one at the beginning and one at the end.
Oh, the one in the beginning.
Oh, is this going backwards?
Yeah, there's 2
okay.
sides.
I gotcha.
I'm trying to get you to the end.
I know.
The very back of it should be page 1. But not in page 1 in the PDFs, page 1 in the text.
Oh, in the text.
Yeah,
We have the PDF.
right, which would PDF numbers would be the very end.
Okay.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's actually page 141. So if you go up at the
One-
top. if you've got a
141?
PDF reader, and you go to 141 of 238, and that
Yes.
shows the plate.
All right, I'm looking. 18, 23. A lot of scrolling.
Way to go faster.
Thank you for Rick finding. it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
again, if you've got, I'm using a PDF viewer on my web.
Oh, yeah, I can see it on the
And at
side of my
the very
iPad.
center, they've got like a page number of 238. So if you type in 141 in that box, it should get you to this page, save you from scrolling.
I'm almost there at the scrolling. 24, 30.
Meanwhile, I want to show you a card I got.
Ah.
I want to show you a card I got from a very special couple. Can you read this? Why?
Mhm.
This is the guy I got in a fight with, unfortunately. Look, Nan. Does this look familiar? Why is Elijah such a welcome guest at Passover? Nan, does this look familiar? And
As he
then
brings the wine.
he has an open door policy.
All right, so it's page 140 is the Seder plate.
You can see who gave it to me.
Bob, is that, I don't say, I can't.
No.
Nan and
And
Rich.
Rich.
Nan and Rich.
Ah,
Yes, have a wonderful holiday. Warm regards, Nan and Rich. So,
You saved it. That was from a couple of years ago.
yeah, well, it's, but look how cute it is.
Oh, it's
It's got a
Snoopy
Snoopy.
And it's,
Lily and Skinny must like it.
Well, who knew that Snoopy was Jewish? Good. grief.
it's got it's a religious text. It deals with a holiday.
It's
so good.
140 is the Seder plate. Okay.
Okay, so raise your hand if you have the text. And the rest you don't have the text?
I have the text. I'm working on getting there.
I'm just listening. I have a different Haggadah.
And you, okay,
So
so,
you know what the Seder plate looks like?
yeah, so get a look at the Seder plate.
Okay.
So, so what's the whole idea of Passover here? So, or the Passover meal? We're talking about the Seder. Tonight, we're going to gather and we have 132 people, I believe. We're maxed
Wow.
out.
More,
Yeah.
140.
140, they let in. I thought they wouldn't, you know, we had.
Well,
a-
They
Helene-
stopped it
Helene
at
got-
127.
Got nice.
They put a couple chairs in.
Oh
Wow.
my.
An
Well,
extra table.
There were 6
Yeah.
people on the waiting list yesterday, and then there was another one that wanted to come, and so there's a lot of demand to go to a Seder. So if you're Jewish and you're not too interested, you generally do at least 2 things a year anyway, and that is Hanukkah and Passover. So what's the whole point of Passover? What are we trying? Now we know the story, although the hero of the story doesn't take much of a role, but we're not looking at the story. We're going to start from the inside out or the outside in and look at what is actually done. And looking at this Seder plate, when you walk in and you don't know anything, you're going to see a Seder plate. And at various points in the Seder, it'll be referred to. So the Seder plate is like of central significance, one would think. But it's not clear to me how this really relates to Judaism, to Passover, so we're going to just spend a couple minutes looking at this plate. So, yes, Marcia, you had an opening.
Well,
comment
to me,
about-
it's all the symbols that relate to the story, then the story that we want to remember, and to remember our history, how we got here, if not anything else.
And so how we got here, meaning that we were slaves in Egypt?
Right, and how we came together as a nation to travel to however we got to, across the desert or not. But the various, the symbolic things that make it, that we have to indicate how to remember the different stuff, so. Yeah.
Okay, Sai.
I was wondering if there's any history as to how the Seder came about. I mean, it was probably organized a long time ago, but who were the people and what was the reason we know, but who were the people that put it all together and made it happen?
A good question, Sai, and this time I'm ready for you. This is a book by Baruch Boxer. He was a professor at University of California, and he died very young, like age 42, of a brain tumor. But before he passed away, he wrote this book, The Origins of the Seder, the Passover Rite, and Early Rabbinic Judaism. And here he goes through the rabbinic texts, and he shows how the rabbis, in the aftermath of the destruction of the temple, which, as we know, occurred in 70 CE, how they put together a ceremony, this meal. So, and now the meal is not just they didn't just pull it out of the air. Romans had a custom of doing a symposium where they would have, like I guess you could call it interactive dinner theater. And right, don't they have shows like that occasionally where there's like a murder mystery and you get dinner and you solve a mystery? And during the course of dinner, different characters pop up, Mr. Mustard or whoever, and says, I didn't kill the person. And then somebody will say, here's a clue. And then by the end of dessert or before dessert, you're supposed to figure out who, so it's like interactive dinner theater. And this is really intended to, mimic the Roman practice of a symposium. And it's a great idea, right? And we've tried to expand this and do Tu B'Shvat Seders and other interactive meals, but none of the other interactive meals have really caught on for whatever reason. But Passover does. Maybe it's the matzah ball soup. Pam, comment?
Oh, no, just that I agree.
Riva, comment?
I'm known for my soup.
Okay. Oh, okay. Steve, comment? No, okay. So we come in and we're not dressed in costume like in Purim, right? Most of the time. One year in Jamaica, I did dress up as Elijah, I think. That was the only time Elijah made an appearance. But But normally we don't dress up, so we wear normal clothes. And we don't, we don't really have a synagogue service because that would be too much. But we have books, whether it's this book or that book. And we sit down and we go through a book. But the book is mostly a guide just to keep things interesting, right? So it's not really like a prayer book, it's more like a play, that's put together. All right, so what's on the Seder plate and what's supposed to, get us interested in certain things? I see 6 circles on the diagram that I have in front of me. But I'm sure even without a diagram, you'd know at least one. Steve.
Matzah.
Okay. And that's in the drawing that we have, matzah is right in the middle.
Yep.
Okay, and sometimes they make Seder plates with just the little stuff and they put the matzah separately. It's got its own tray, but there's matzah. How many matzah?
3.
3.
3. Steve, did you say 3 originally, or I thought I saw?
On the Seder plate, there's usually just the 1.
Okay.
But on matzah plate, it
But,
would,
but then on the matzah plate, you have 3 because you have the first, middle, and last, with the middles for the afikomen.
Okay. Oh, the afikomen.
Yeah.
Now, afikomen doesn't seem like a Hebrew word to me, but it's definitely part of the Seder. And what is the afikomen?
The dessert.
Dessert, okay, which is why in my contract I have that the afikomen must be chocolate covered.
Ah,
What, to eat something like this for dessert, just like this? This is not what I came to Arizona for. I want
dry matzah.
chocolate. I want orange flavored chocolate, dark chocolate covered matzah. But that's not in my contract, unfortunately. But so the afikomen is you take a matzah and what do you do with it? You
Break it in half.
there you go. And then you take 1/2 and what do you do with it?
hide it.
Hide it.
Okay. And I did this at the women's Seder for the women, right? And then
Yeah.
I didn't hide it that well, so that they found it right away. But
Work on that.
We'll work on that, yes. If you hide it too much, then nobody can ever find it. You find it 10 or 15 years later, and that's not a good thing either.
Well, if you hide it too well, we can't finish the Seder. So
Right.
That's true.
we'll be there till
Have to start
tomorrow
over.
morning.
Now,
Start
we're,
over.
we're talking about this on 2 planes, right? There's the halachic plane and the non-halachic plane. We're not following all the laws of Orthodox Judaism strictly, but if we were, we would not eat anything after you eat the afikomen. So the afikomen literally, as Nan said, is dessert, and that's it. So once the afikomen's eaten, you're done. And in our case, we're not necessarily done. We can always get more macaroons, but that's not following the strict procedure. So what's the point of the matzah?
It represents the haste that the Israelis had to get out and they couldn't leaven the bread.
Why did they have to, hold on just a second. Hi, can I call you back?
This is Bookie.
Oh, thank you for getting back to me. I'll do my best to call you back. Okay, bye. That was Reverend Harry Way from the I believe the Sun City Episcopalian Church.
We're very popular at Passover.
And and by the way, most scholars, or the majority of scholars, do not believe that the Last Supper was a Seder. This there's a big controversy in history of early Christianity or history of the Jesus movement, whether the Last Supper that's described in the New Testament was a Passover Seder. But whatever it was a Jewish ceremonial occasion because they were all Jews, but it may not have been Passover. Okay, so back to this matzah. Nan, you were saying, I think?
Well, they didn't have a chance to let the bread rise, so it was a flat bread because they had to get out of Egypt very quickly.
It looks pretty flat to me. Now, it's distinctive, and it even has the little you see the little ripples on the things and the little brown spots. So you could, and in fact, this Haggadah has in their background a piece of matzah.
But
So
weren't they commanded to not have yeast? Wasn't like,
correct,
you're not supposed to have it.
correct.
But that's in retrospect, but at the time it was in haste.
Right. So in order to recreate the experience as best we can, then we don't put in yeast so it doesn't rise. But at the time, they weren't trying to create matzah, they just had no time, or that's the story. That's the story anyway. If you ask Sai, how much of this do you think is historical?
So I have a question,
This
Rabbi.
is not the time for that.
Sai is being diplomatic. So, okay, yes, Marcia.
I know, I'm being a pain in the neck, but so I know there's a lot of controversy about the accuracy of the Seder, et cetera. Do you, from your studies as a historian, think that this, at least the initial leaving Egypt was accurate, that part of it, that some Jews did leave? Is that, do you think, is that?
I'd rather you ask Sai that question.
I'm not asking Sai is.
I'm going to take the Fifth Amendment, but I think that what's important to me is the creation of the Seder in the time of the rabbis, that this is a way to take what was done in Passover in the temple and accurately transform it into a ceremony that could be done in people's houses without a temple. So at that point, I think it's as accurate a transformation as possible. So you see how I evaded your
You
question?
did evade it, yes.
I evaded your question pretty much completely. But I answered the question I want to answer, which is really quite serious. And that is that this is a very important rabbinic creation based on trying to bring as much from the temple Passover observance as possible. So I think it brings over as much as accurately as it could from the temple. Going back to the times of the Exodus, I'm going to let Sai be the expert on that because I don't want to deal with the heat that might result. Pam.
Question. So historically, the Seder has been a home-based event and not a synagogue-based event, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And so let's go back to the year 71, 73, 76. The rabbis are just dealing with the destruction of the temple. Up until that time, Passover had been this huge celebration in Jerusalem. The leaders of Judaism had closed down over the past 400, 500, or 600 years all the other Jewish temples. Originally, there'd been Jewish temples in various places. They said, no, we only want one temple in Jerusalem. Everybody in Israel and also in the diaspora, if you could, would come to Jerusalem 3 times a year, including Passover, to do this celebration. You'd bring sacrifices, you'd have celebrations. Now that's gone. So what do? So they want to, so that they literally sat down in Yavne, which was a little town where the Romans put refugees, and they developed, here's like a picture of an early Seder down there, and they try to develop a substitute. But they didn't have a lot of synagogues. Synagogues had only been starting for 200 years. They weren't well developed. Most of the synagogues were more like community centers. So they didn't, if every community had a synagogue, maybe they would have said, oh, let's do this in the synagogues. But they didn't. So there wasn't really an option. Plus, they knew that a lot of people wouldn't be able to get to the synagogues. So they figured we'd do it at home. That's the best that I can think of. Steve or Nan, you want to add anything about the home aspect? Okay. Rick?
I definitely don't have anything to add. I'm
Okay,
just here to learn.
okay. Marcia,
But I'm just, so this is basically a way to make sure that Judaism continues. Because if you can't travel to the temple that isn't anymore, you have people in their homes being able to observe.
correct,
Remember.
correct.
Otherwise, it would be I think the fact that they limited themselves to one temple in the first place when they said no more smaller offshoots, I think that was probably a mistake. Well, it wasn't a mistake because they were just Israel at that point. They had no idea of the world or anything.
Well, and the Kohanim in the temple in Jerusalem wanted to centralize control, right? If you're going to make policies for the whole religion,
Right.
you have to be the only temple. If there's a bunch of temples and you say, from now on, Judaism stands for this, the other people in the other temples will say, no, it doesn't. So in order to have a centralized control, you had to only have one. Like the Catholic Church has one Vatican, one Pope. And during the Middle Ages, you probably know in Avignon, there was a second Pope. There was a fight, I think in the 12th or 13th century. And there was a Pope in Rome and there was a Pope in Avignon. And that obviously didn't work very well because you have two heads on the dragon. You know, and they're each pulling a different way, or they're each trying to pull a different way. So as long as there was a temple, having one temple was a good idea. Now, so they're trying to create a home ritual, but most Jews still believe they were going to rebuild the temple, right? The temple had been destroyed before. It had been, partially deconstructed to renovate. The idea that temples come, temple go, and then you rebuild the temple was not that big a deal. So most Jews thought in a few years, the Romans will allow us to rebuild the temple and everything will go back to normal. But for various reasons, political issues and so forth, that didn't happen. And so, now by the time they realized that, another group had been pushing this home Passover ritual. Marcia.
So they still say 57 or 800 years later, next year in Jerusalem.
Right. And when you
hope
say
it's
that, it's not saying that you're going to do a 2-week tour of Jerusalem. It's not even saying you're going to move there. It's saying you're going to move there and you're going to rebuild the temple and restore the Passover sacrifice. And did you hear that the Israeli police arrested 2 days ago a guy who was planning to sacrifice a goat on the Temple Mount for Passover? And the reason they arrested him is because if he does that, the Muslims are going to think that the Jews are planning to take over the site, and then there's going to be like a world war. Sorry.
When during the Roman civilization, the Romans were, pretty civilized people. And I'm just curious as to the sacrifices. Did they exist or didn't they exist in the temple during the Roman times? I mean, as I say, the Romans were civilized people, and I'm just wondering if if all this sacrifice was going on in the temple during that time. I'm a little reluctant to think so. And so when the temple disappeared, when the Romans captured it, and they were forming little groups to pray, sacrifice was not an issue anymore. And they never came back to sacrifice.
They liked it, yes, they did the sacrifices. And before the temple was destroyed, there was a very active sacrificial cult there. And people would bring animals every 5 minutes, and the Kohanim and Levim would sacrifice them and give back most of the meat to the people that brought the sacrifice. And then they would be in Jerusalem for the Passover holiday, and they would eat that meat and vegetables and stuff, and they'd stay in Airbnbs. And it was a huge event. You know, you can also understand the economic importance to Jerusalem of having hundreds of thousands of pilgrims come in for the 3 pilgrimage festivals, including Passover. And maybe Passover was the biggest of the 3, maybe. Okay, back to the matzah. So we have the 3 matzah. And if you want to turn now to page 6, so then we'll turn to the Magid. So Magid is the part of the Seder where you tell the story. And it starts, you know, first you wash your hands, and then you eat the vegetable in the salt water, and then you break the middle matzah in 2 and put the larger part away as the afikomen, as Marcia said. And then on page 6, you come to the halachma anya, which is Aramaic. And halachma anya, does anybody know the tune there? It's halachma anya di achalu, and that's Aramaic. And I'll read it to you. Do you see it on page 6? If not in any Haggadah, it's toward the beginning. It's under Magid.
Is this about the matzah?
Behold, the bread of poverty that our
Page-
ancestors ate while in the land of Egypt. All who are
148.
hungry, come and eat. All who are needy, come and participate in this Passover ritual. Today we are here, next year in the land of Israel. Today we are slaves, next year we shall be free people. So what is it called, the matzah?
Bread of affliction.
Yes, bread of affliction or bread of poverty. What does that mean, bread of affliction?
Well. Anybody?
Nan, Minya, Riva, Pam. Well, we can read the commentary there, number 1. Behold, the bread of poverty. Halach ma'anya is recited while raising the matzah for emphasis. Do you remember this?
Yes.
To indicate that the matzah we use at the Seder is the very bread our ancestors ate in Egypt. From the wording of this declaration, it sounds as though we are referring to bread we ate while still slaves. However, the Torah never explicitly refers to matzah as such. The Torah does instruct the Israelites to eat matzah together with the original Passover offering during the plague of the firstborn. But primarily it tells of the Israelites eating matzah on the way out of Egypt, the matzah they baked in haste as they rushed to leave. In fact, the very term lachma anya, which is a Aramaic translation of the Hebrew lechem oni, bread of affliction or bread of poverty, derives from a verse that speaks of eating matzah on Passover to remember the hurriedness with which our ancestors left slavery. This is from Deuteronomy chapter 16. You shall not eat unleavened stuff with it. 7 days you shall eat it with flat cakes, poverty's bread. For in haste you did go out of the land of Egypt, so that you will remember the day of your going out from Egypt all the days of your life. Therefore, the lachma anya then is not the bread of bondage, but the bread of redemption. However, it's meant to remind us specifically of the unpreparedness that characterized our departure from Egypt, the swift and sudden way in which the redemption occurred. So he's saying that it's not really the bread of bondage, it's the bread of redemption. Comments? Yes, Pam. Unmute.
My Haggadah calls it the matzah of hope.
Ah. And hold up your Haggadah. And what is it?
It's Family Haggadah by Car Ben copies in
Okay.
every generation. We've had this forever.
So the matzah of hope.
Yes.
So that's kind of going with the with the interpretation here, that it's not really lechem oni or bread of affliction or bread of poverty. It's more the bread of redemption. And in Pam's Haggadah, instead of redemption, that they figured most people won't know what that means, they churn redemption into hope.
Can I just read this paragraph?
Yes.
This matzah is set aside as a symbol of hope for those Jews throughout the world who are not free. They are not free to celebrate the Seder. They are not free to express their Jewish identity. They are not free to read Jewish books, to learn of their Jewish past, or to hand it down to their children. Their voices have risen in Jewish pride and protest. Tonight, we add our voices to theirs. They have not been forgotten.
So it moves a little bit in between the two interpretations. But I think my Haggadah goes further and says, since we were eating this basically once we left Egypt, it's the bread of redemption. It's the bread that you eat to celebrate. It's like champagne rather than the bread of poverty. So this is not so much to remind us that we were slaves in Egypt. It's to remind us that, well, we just escaped. So, okay, we may not have the best French croissants, but we're free. So it totally changes the symbolism of the matzah. Comments? Pam, back to you maybe.
I think that I like Pam's Haggadah's version of it, and because it includes people now. I think when we say it as redemption, it's then, it's what was happening then. It was what we had to take with us into the desert. And her version, it's looking to people in the present who can't celebrate, and it's the hope that they'll be able to.
Mm-hmm. So does matzah represent something positive or something negative?
Positive.
Positive. Nan?
Positive.
Riva? Positive or negative? Matzah?
Both.
Both. Okay. Rick?
Yeah, I like just the fact that you do have kind of both. You're coming out, but you're leading toward hope. That whole redemption thing is, hey, God's going to work this out. So it encourages hope. So I think it's kind of two sides of the same coin. But sometimes, and even in our day and age, we can get kind of discouraged with what's going on. And we need to realize that,
Very easily.
God's there. So, we have hope.
Sai, positive or negative?
Well, I think it's negative. It reminds us of all the very bad things, and we don't want to go back there. And it's a constant reminder how bad things were. So let's look forward all the time, but constantly be reminded of the bad things.
But my guy here is saying that this is more a memory of the escape rather than the slavery. Right. So even though we're not remembering eating great food, we've escaped. We're already out of Egypt in the desert. All right, we're eating this, but we're free, or we're on our way to be free. That's good. So we should eat this with pride and with hope and with
with
Joy.
Horosis.
and with harosas.
We gotta do better than that, Fred.
I'll take it, I'll take the more.
We need
You,
more than
together.
Let's move to charoset next, because I never understood the symbolism there. So on the plate, if you go to the left of the matzah, you'll see the charoset. What is charoset? Who can explain what that is?
It's like the building of bricks.
All right,
The mortar for the building.
Mortar.
so mortar should be very thick and pasty and gooky and yucky. No?
Yes,
You add honey though, and it makes it sweet,
or wine.
or wine, well, both.
But I now, Steve, I never understood this. Why would it taste good? It's representing the slaves having to put the paste down to make the bricks stick together. This should be the worst thing to have to eat. It should be torture.
Well, it reminds us of bitter times.
But it's not bitter.
No, it's not the bitter.
No, it's not bitter, but the times were bitter. So
Because if we
create-
tried to
create
put,
something-
if we put
something-
horseradish and something terrible tasting, it would be totally unpalatable.
But isn't that the point? I mean, aren't we supposed to remember slavery? So what's,
that's
in-
the-
yes, Riva,
Yeah, I think the entire plate provides symbolism for the entire story, and there are positive and negative elements of the story.
so that here too, they're looking forward a little bit. So what do you put in charoset? Give me the recipe.
Nuts,
Depends
wine,
where you're from.
Nuts and wine.
All right, wait, raise
uh,
your hands one at a time, please. Nan,
Well, it depends where you're from. The Sephardic Jews, use dates and figs and dried fruit, and it becomes almost more like a paste, and it's very dark. I found I read a very interesting article yesterday about it, and they showed different types of haroset, starting with the traditional Ashkenazi, which is what we use of walnuts, apples, and raisins with wine. But then there's a New Orleans style, which is Creole and has a little different flavor, and Ukrainian and Turkish and Moroccan, and depending on where you live and what's available at the time, the haroset is very different. And some
Hmm.
people don't like the sweet wine. They use something that is not as sweet. And I just thought that was really very interesting.
Trader Joe's. I got my matzahs at Trader Joe's.
Mhm.
And they were selling with the matzahs. They had Israeli wine, presumably for the Seder, but it was kind of upscale, not sweet
Mhm.
wine, a red wine. They were selling to a more sophisticated palate.
But when I lived in New York, I used to like the Carmel wine, but I don't, you can't get that now. And my preference was at the Seder to drink the white wine, which I'm a white wine drinker as opposed to red, but the Carmel was not as sweet either.
Marcia, and then more recipes about charoset. Yes.
Oh, it was funny. I saw something the other day online where they actually showed a supermarket that had containers of salt water.
I saw that too. That's so
Salt
funny.
water in a plastic container to buy that to put on the table.
For the Seder.
Yeah.
Oh, people are too lazy to
Too
Yeah.
lazy.
Yeah.
pour some
Well,
butter. in the
kosher
pot.
salt water or something? Is that why they did it? Some people wanted
Yeah,
quote
yeah, but-
unquote kosher salt water?
Does it have to be kosher salt?
No.
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 Hey,
No, you don't have to.
let's all, one at a time, please, one at a time.
Okay, that's my fault. I'm sorry. Who'd like to talk? We're on Charoset. Riva recipe?
The same, I have this, I use the same one Nan has talked about. It's the Ashkenazi one.
Me too.
I think, Steve, instead of a chili cook-off next year, you could do a Charoset cook-off. And
Well, that would be interesting.
and see who, because I think if the 10 of us all made Charoset, it would come, we'd have at least 7 very different, types. You can put orange in there,
Mhm.
and you can put, you could put things that would make it quite different. And some,
Rabbi,
of course,
what do they do in Israel?
well, I think the way Nan described it, the Sephardim have very different customs about that, and so it can come out quite different than what we're used to here. But there's, again, wherever you go, it's different. But it's not like I ate hundreds and hundreds of charoset there, Every year I'd go to one Seder and that would be the charoset for the year, They don't sell it in the supermarket, so, they don't give out taste tests. So I have a problem with this because I think it's wrong. I think it should be a very horrible tasting paste. And I never understood why something that really is so delicious, it represents the mortar. So I'm not really happy with this.
I think, Rabbi, since God gave us lemons, we made lemonade. So if we had to deal with the mortar, we made something decent out of it.
So Riva kind of hinted at the solution to this, and she said there's something about, that all the symbols of the Seder plate represent the totality of the Seder experience. And so I think the fact that the charoset is sweet, and that specifically, I think, who was saying, Nan, that it frequently includes dates or figs, that there's there is a hint there to something else, that this is symbolism for something completely different. And what might that be? Remembering that the Egyptians wanted to kill the firstborn males, and they wanted to, they were trying to, the whole fight was over, population. So what do you think that the charoset might symbolize? That would be a positive thing with the figs and the dates. And anybody? Well, if the Egyptians were trying to do what? With the
Kill the firstborn.
killing of the males, right? Like Moses.
Yeah.
So they're trying to do what?
Wipe out the Jews.
Right. And so
Yes.
therefore thank you, Riva. So then therefore the symbolism of charoset might be,
Elimination.
no, the opposite, something positive,
Preservation.
Okay.
right? Which would reflect itself by doing what? If the Egyptians want to kill all the male children, Jewish children, to prevent population, then therefore the charoset might be symbolizing the opposite, which would be
Birth control.
no, the opposite of birth control,
He wants a
No
positive.
birth control.
Preservation.
which would be, Shirley, you almost had it, but just not the control part. Shirley, say it again, but without the last word.
Doesn't remember what she said. I don't remember.
She said birth control.
Oh, birth control.
Birth?
Yes, thank you. Who said that?
Marcia.
Okay, good. Thank you, Shirley, for leading to Marcia's success. So therefore, the charoset, in my thinking, is not symbolic of the mortar, really. It's symbolic of the hope for fertility, that it's a fertility ritual. And the figs and the dates with all their seeds in the figs, the figs have all that seeds. And the dates have the big pit in the middle.
Pit.
These are things that to me represent the possibility of greater fertility. So anyway, so again, I'm flipping all these symbols around. I'm saying the matzah, instead of it being a lechem oni, bread of affliction, bread of poverty, it's actually celebration of escape. And with the charoset, I'm saying instead of it being the mortar of the building of the bricks that the slaves had to build, I'm saying it is something you eat to encourage fertility. All right. So nobody's convinced. You think I'm hopelessly optimistic, or I'm just completely out of my mind. Okay. Let's go on. What other symbols do you have on the plate? Yes, Sai.
I wanna throw a new thought into the puzzle. When the Jews started to travel in the desert, weren't there any other people living in the desert
We always-
besides the Jews that were just initially coming into the desert?
Yes.
I assume there were people living in the desert.
Yes.
I'm wondering why they didn't trade with one another to improve themselves food-wise and otherwise, as long as there were other people.
Well, presumably they did to some degree. There weren't a lot of people, and some of them, most of them may have been nomads. But the reason that God didn't let them take the northern highway route across near the ocean was because that was most of the settled area. And those groups up there, had towns, or maybe not cities, but towns, and they had militaries that would resist, so they wouldn't let the Israelites go there. They wouldn't, they were designed to stop invaders. So they wouldn't be friendly. Throughout the rest of the Sinai, there were probably, what we'd call today Bedouins, and you could trade with them and do whatever you wanted. And the Israelites essentially would have been another group of Bedouins traveling around. But they had to avoid most of the towns. And as you know, they didn't spend 40 years just wandering. They spent a lot of that time in a town in the eastern Sinai called Kadesh Barnea. And there were presumably other people in that town, not just Israelites. And we don't hear, as far as I'm aware, of any conflict with them. And but the Torah doesn't go into the trade because it's not really interested in economic history. But I'm sure, yeah, that they traded, that they did other stuff. But the goal was never to stay in Sinai, even if it had been good. There's a religious purpose to settling in the promised land. Not just that it's a land of milk and honey, but it's the land of fulfilling the religious vision that God has set before the children of Israel. So, you're trying to go somewhere to fulfill religious goals. So, other comments, questions? Okay, pick another symbol then. We've done the matzah, we've done the charoset. Maror, who said that? Okay, maror's to the right of the matzah, and what does maror symbolize in your minds?
Bitterness,
Bitterness. Oh boy! And why does it
tears, bitterness and tears.
Tears.
The harshness of the journey.
Mhm.
Ooh. The harshness of the journey, or the harshness
Of the life in Egypt.
Yeah, what they left. That's
Yeah.
true.
Okay, who said that?
Nan.
And
So here we have two views here. Does it represent the harshness of the slavery, or the harshness of the 40 years in the desert?
I think the slavery.
Probably right.
Maybe
Pam,
Pam.
Yes. Nan?
no,
Pam.
No,
Pam.
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 Maybe it Maybe it's both.
Okay. Good. Good. Which is more important then?
Slavery.
Slavery. So was slavery just an unbelievable traumatic experience for the Israelites?
I would say so. I would say so.
Yes, Marcia?
Except they kept going, wanting to go back because they couldn't take what they were going
Well-
through.
Well, some of them.
Yeah, some of them.
I mean, people are different and some people's priorities are different, right? I mean, I could say we're going on an all expense paid 3-week trip of Mongolia by camel. And some of us will get there and it's unbelievable experience. You know, you're in real desert on a real camel with real Mongolians guiding you and sleeping in the, what do they sleep in, the yurts? You know,
Yurts.
these like Mongolian tents. And some of us will be saying this is such an authentic experience. It's something I've dreamed about my whole life. And other people say, I thought we were staying in the Marriott yurt. And I want to go home now. Get me out of here. There's no hot showers, nothing. So it's all, different people are different, right? And if it's also, there's the physical limitations of slavery. You can't do what you want when you want. But then there's the conditions. So some people might say, well, if the conditions are okay, and they feed you well and they don't overwork you, then I don't mind that I don't have freedom of speech. And other people say, no, they could give us caviar every day, but the fact that I'm technically a slave and I don't have full rights, I'd rather die. I'll fight to the death for freedom. So some people, put priorities differently. I remember when I was writing about Jews in Cuba, and it was very hard to find people that were against the government on ideological grounds. So like I find a lot of people complain the government's terrible. Why? We don't have enough money. And I said, but what about you don't have full freedom of expression? The newspapers are censored. And almost 99 out of 100 Cubans say, I don't care about that. Let them print what they want in the newspapers. If we had plenty of stuff, if there was plenty of money, then they can censor the newspapers all they want. And there were a few people I ran into that were these, intellectual dissidents, and they said, it's nothing to do with money, it's democracy. But they were very, very rare. So most people give them comfort and they're fine. Rick.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of, I was at a conference with Frank Luntz, who was speaking about a survey that he did. And the percentages of people that would had a higher priority for security over freedom was shocking to me. And so I think that's kind of what you're talking about here. Security, we want the food, we want security. We're not so much concerned about freedom. I mean, that's what he was finding in America even.
Well, it would make sense that this would be any group. It's not just the Israelites. There's no reason to think the Israelites would differ percentage-wise from the Cubans or the Americans or the Russians or Ukrainians or the Saudis people are people, and they're probably going to break up into the similar percentages. I mean, I guess culture and society also play a role. But okay, other comments about Moror? Yes, Riva.
I was just going to comment on the hierarchy. And that is, isn't it Maslow has the hierarchy of values? And that
Correct.
the most basic values are, survival ones, food, shelter, that sort of thing. And then you have the luxury of having, looking at higher levels of I'm not sure if the word is values or something similar, but you can't
Hierarchy
afford
of
to-
needs.
Of needs, that's right. That's the hierarchy of needs. That was the word I was missing. And that is your most basic needs are essential first. And then you move up to more sophisticated or more values that are less essential to survival, such as the various freedoms.
So if you're not comfortable in your house, you don't have enough heat, and you're sitting there shivering, then having freedom of expression doesn't mean anything.
Right, exactly.
So if we go to Mongolia, I have to make sure the earth is heated enough. Or you won't get the full experience of what it's like to trek through Mongolia on a camel.
You will get the full experience.
Yeah, for sure.
You won't be able to savor the full experience. Okay, other comments about maror. So how much maror should you eat? You should eat a lot of it. Isn't this the central symbol of the entire Seder? The bitterness? Shouldn't you just shovel down the really strong stuff?
Enough to make you cry and clear your sinuses.
Uh-huh.
Whatever they had at the women's Seder, that was tough maror. I don't know what they
Yeah,
had.
that was Canadian, and
Really? Oh my
it's
God.
it really is. It was powerful stuff.
Yeah,
I think we're going to have that tonight too. So if you're
It was-
coming
it was-
tonight, be prepared.
It was red, I think, right?
Yeah,
Yes, but it
it's the
wasn't
beat.
difficult.
And usually the red is so mild, you don't even feel
Oh, not
anything.
that stuff.
No,
That stopped you in your tracks.
Yeah,
I'm pretty tough and I like, strong maror, and I took a little bit of that and my eyes almost popped out of my side.
Where did you get that stuff?
Asiana Market, 43rd Avenue in Union Hills.
And it's what kind?
It's Canadian and it was kosher.
And
So
horseradish?
but horseradish, they had white prepared and the red. So
White was probably tougher then. Oh my God.
I don't know, there, one time I was at Sprouts and they had like a brand that said extra hot. And I avoided it, but I mean, you could get various degrees of white horseradish too. I mean, I think if you'd want something less mild, grate a horseradish root, and if you just have a little piece, it's not as sharp as when you grind it up in a food processor and pulverize it. So
Okay, and
God knows
another symbol on the Seder plate. Next one.
Egg.
Egg, okay.
I never understood the egg.
And what does the egg symbolize?
Life.
Rebirth.
life, growing up, we referred to it as fertility and the continuity of life.
And
But I don't know traditionally.
the lifespan is
It's a circle.
so therefore the egg is basically a circle, so it symbolizes the course of life from birth to death. It's also about it also symbolizes sacrifices that were offered in the temple in the springtime. And it also symbolizes in mysticism, what does mysticism believe that every person has inside them? That goes back from comes from God and goes back to God.
so,
So
Thank you, Steve. So the egg symbolizes the soul and the fact that what does the soul have that the rest of our bodies does not have?
Eternity.
Right, thank you, Riva. So the soul is put into us when we're born, and when we die, it goes back to God, because the rest of our bodies die and decay and disintegrate, but not the soul. And in Kabbalah, there's different parts of the soul, but just to keep it simple. So that's the egg. So that's pretty important. But why do we have to talk about the soul on Passover?
good question, Rabbi.
Yes, Steve.
Why is the egg on the Seder plate roasted rather than just peeled and put on the plate?
I can answer that. Does anybody else want to take it? Okay, it's because of the sacrifice. It's roasted because the temple roasted the sacrifices. And specifically the spring sacrifices. So that by roasting the egg, you're making it more like the sacrifice. And that was probably the most important actual symbolism. This, what I'm talking about now about the eternity of the soul, that was probably added later by mystics who just saw the egg and they played around with it. But the purpose was probably to represent the sacrifice. Not the Passover sacrifice, other sacrifices, because what's representing the Passover sacrifice, that's another element on the Seder plate, which is the,
Lambo.
right, and in Hebrew, Zeroah. And that is the Passover sacrifice. So there's two sacrifices, or there's multiple sacrifices being symbolized here. So you see just how important the temple ritual was for the development of the Seder plate. But I don't think people coming tonight are going to be, sitting at our Seder thinking, well, we really should be doing this in Jerusalem in the temple. It's become its own thing that people don't necessarily automatically think this whole thing was created as a substitute. Other symbols on the plate, there's one more.
Corpus,
And what is that?
The green.
the
Oh,
greens, the
Greens, that we
parsley.
put in salt water, yeah.
Okay. And so why salt water?
Again, the tears.
Very
Cheers.
sad. But why parsley, or why a green leafy vegetable? That seems to be something positive, full of life and full of green. What does that symbolize?
I think spring and the fact that things are blooming and there's new life and, we're continuing on. They haven't gotten rid of us yet.
Good. I like Nan's explanation. Sai, can you come up with a more historical one that would go backwards rather than forwards? Where did the Jews, the Israelites enslaved in Egypt, what were they doing before they were enslaved?
Were they farmers?
Farmers.
And well, what were who brought them to Egypt, or what was the origin of the story?
Jacob.
Jacob and Joseph, right? Joseph.
Well, Jacob,
It was the
let
farmer.
them, in order for them to survive, they had to go to Egypt because there was a famine.
Right.
So
And
they decided to go there.
So they went there and they prospered for a while, and Jacob's son Joseph became prime minister. So I would argue that the Karpas represents also what Nan said, that we look forward to, thriving in the near future, but also looking back, we look back at the time in Egypt when we were doing well there, when we were thriving, when one of our own was the second in charge of the whole country. So not everything about Egypt was negative, right? We voluntarily went there because it had more food. We voluntarily stayed there because we were well accepted. We stayed there because we were able to build good businesses or good farms. And it was only much later that things deteriorated. Okay, now Susanna Heschel suggests adding it. Sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, I heard somebody say something.
I did too.
Well, do you think that could, we're setting, we're putting a wine glass for Elijah and a water glass for Miriam. Do you think that was Miriam?
Could be.
Okay. Now Susanna Heschel says we should add one more element to the Seder plate. What is that?
At the orange,
Orange?
Orange.
Right, and what does the orange symbolize?
Women's place at the Seder.
And explain.
Well, it said in our Women's Seder book that it was a myth, but it was supposed to be a story about rabbis who excluded women from participating in the service. And it said that it would be as unlikely as having an orange on the Seder plate as to have women participate.
Right, so some male rabbi made a nasty comment about that. And of course, I would never make such a nasty comment.
Better not.
I can see that with the ultra orthodox. I mean, women don't have any role other than raising the children and taking care of the home. You know, the men study, the men are the rabbis. There are no women rabbis, no women cantors. They sit separate from the men. And, you know, so I can see that today
Um,
in an ultra Orthodox community or congregation.
All right, different sets of values, right? Not just on gender roles, but on a
Mhm.
lot of things. And when you have different values, the way you interpret your religion, especially over the course of a couple generations, is going to deviate very, very dramatically. Yes, Riva.
And I'm just reminded in Orthodox households, the role of ushering the house for Pesach and all the activities of food making and everything inflate the role of women. You know, and I get photographs from my stepkids, and it's the elaborately prepared kitchens with the tin foil and all this
Mhm.
other stuff covering everything. And I recall when I was with some of them for previous Passovers, there was just an elaborate amount of time, effort, discussion of that preparation that I just found bizarre, and I just kept my mouth shut. But I saw an extraordinary amount of focus on koshering everything.
And so that's a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't know, it's your cultural choice,
Okay.
not mine.
So that's the Seder plate, and then we have all
Good
these.
question, Rabbi.
Yes, Steve.
Okay, the way that the Seder plate is represented, why is there why is the matzah in the middle? Is there specific reasoning for where items are placed on the Seder plate?
Anyone want to take that?
I
Why?
never thought about it.
Well, it's kind of circular, indicating that there's no beginning and end, right? So you've got a round plate, not a square plate. You don't have an order like from beginning to end, which is why, you know, all the elements are in circle. So there's no real prioritization.
Is it
of
always
them.
the same? Are all these plates set up the same? I never thought about it. Can I get my?
Well, there is a halakhic way to do it. Yes, Riva.
Yeah, my understanding is I've got a couple of Haggadah here, and one of them is an Orthodox one. And in the Orthodox plate, the matzah is on a separate plate. It's not the center of the Seder plate. It has a plate of its own.
And in Reform, most of the time, I think that's true as well. And that's probably for practical reasons as well. You know, you've got these little, you know, things with a lot of juice, and then you have these matzahs. It doesn't really, it's hard to set up one plate where everything would stay separate and clean. Marcia, and then anyone else that wants to
All
talk.
right, I brought in my Seder plate sitting on my table, and I put the egg in that place where it is here. And I have the egg and the bitter herbs. That one has egg and shank bone. It's not the same arrangement as on there. And I wondered if maybe this isn't illegal, or is it random?
Well, what is the difference?
The order of where they are on the plate is not the same. If
I don't
put
think it matters.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I've got 6 separate. Well, I have lettuce as well as parsley.
Yes,
I do
there's
too.
an alternative where you have 2 leafy vegetables,
Yeah.
and yeah.
So
So I guess there are customs that differ, in terms of what goes on the Seder plate. Remembering also, this only goes back to the Talmud. There's nothing in the Bible that mentions anything about a Seder plate.
Mhm.
So it's a relatively later process. Now, in addition to Seder plate, we have another ceremony that involves drinking or eating something, and involves multiples of it. And what is that? So you have the Seder plate. Let's assume
The line.
yeah, so if we assume the matzahs are going to be on their own plate, we have a Seder plate with all the condiments, if you will. Then we have, although the shank bone is not eaten, right? It just sits there.
Right.
And in Georgia, they bought these huge ribs that were 14 feet long. And they took them out of the freezer every year, put them on the plate, dumped them back in the freezer, and we used them for like 20 years. And they were really very impressive looking. And so you have the Seder plate, you have the matzah plate, and then you have the 4 glasses of wine. You tell me about that. Are the rabbis trying to get everyone drunk?
It
Good.
wouldn't hurt.
It happens in
Because
some families.
Halachically, it is an obligation to fill the wine glass up and to drink it all, or to drink it almost all. So you can't just take a sip. That doesn't meet your obligation according to the Talmud. So you've got to drink most of 4 glasses of wine. So why would you do that? And you notice 4 is a big number in the Seder. What is 4? Well, you have 4 of what?
Questions?
4 questions. Good. 4 glasses of wine. Yes, Steve?
4 sons.
4 sons or 4 children. Yes. Anything else?
4
The
questions.
matzahs are
Right.
3.
Right. But did they increase the matzahs to 4 when I was little? You have a 4th matzah to save Soviet Jewry. And this year, there's an article saying you should put a 4th matzah in honor of the Russian Jewish journalist who was just imprisoned.
Or how about for the Ukrainians?
Well,
That too.
yeah, Pam, you could start that. That would make sense.
Nice pile of matzah.
Yes. And you have plenty of matzah. It's relatively cheap. Sai.
Why isn't Moses mentioned during the Passover?
Oh, that's of course a good question. Isn't Moses mentioned once in the Haggadah?
I don't think so.
But whether he's mentioned once or 0, because I thought it was 0 too, and then I was listening to one of the videos from the Hartman Institute, and the person lecturing said that Moses is only mentioned once. But whether he's mentioned once or not at all, it's still bizarre. Why would Moses be mentioned so little when the whole story is essentially about him? Anyone? Steve, Nan?
Maybe it has to do with the Seder being a matter of community and not of an individual person.
Clearly, yes. Good answer. I think there's an effort not to glorify Moses here. They don't want this turning into all about Moses kind of thing. The stress is on the concept of liberation from slavery, of freedom, of religious duty, and they wanted to keep Moses out of it because otherwise they're afraid Moses would become too glorified, so that's probably the answer. 1 year in Georgia, what I did is I asked everyone to bring one item with them to the Seder that symbolized liberation. So if I were to ask you to do that, what items might you bring? Anything, doesn't have to be a food item, anything, as long as you can carry it, that symbolizes liberation. Steve?
Well, we're bringing our own little Seder plate. It's made from Jerusalem stone, and the caddies are glass, so you have 5 different items for the glass
Right.
pieces. So that's what we're planning to do.
That's interesting. And you're bringing that tonight?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Items that symbolize liberation, Marcia?
Maybe a pencil or a pen that shows the freedom of speech.
Oh, okay.
Hmm.
Okay, anyone else? Rick, Minya, Cy?
My mother was always sure that my grandfather had a very, very comfortable pillow when he sat
Oh,
down.
yes. Well, and that's part of the obligation. You are supposed to sit at Passover Seder with a pillow so you can lean onto the pillow to indicate, and that's how the Romans did it. You're supposed to relax and, but tonight we're going to be probably in relatively, stiff chairs. But, it's symbolic, but bring a pillow with you if you remember. All right, I was planning to go through the commentary, but we only did the preliminary Seder plate and we ran out of time. So what we'll do is after the Seder tonight, why don't we reconvene at 10 p.m. and we can study all night?
I will probably still be at the temple putting dishes on.
Oh,
Wow.
Steve is exempt, but the rest of us, and that is part of the tradition here. There's one of the stories where the group of rabbis were discussing the meaning of the Passover Seder, and then one of their students come to them and says, "It's daybreak. It's light already. You guys have been talking all night, and presumably you haven't eaten dinner even." And then they decide, well, it's daytime, so we need to start praying the morning prayers. And so we could do the same thing. But anyway, our time is up, so I'm going to turn this back to Steve, and I'll see how many people are coming tonight to our Seder. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, exactly half of our group. So for everyone, a happy Passover. May you enjoy. And may your matzah be covered in better chocolate than mine. You can see the chocolate covering is very thin here, and you can barely taste it. So, and may we look at the positive interpretations of the holiday and work toward freedom and liberation. Over to you, Steve.
I don't have any announcements per se, so let us conclude then with the final blessing.
Can I just do a quick announcement?
Sure, go ahead,
Sure.
Rick.
I have an extra copy. Pam has a book group for the temple. I have an extra copy of the book for the next meeting that I don't need. I'm going to bring it with me to the Seder tonight. So if anybody needs a book for the next book club meeting, I've got the book.
Oh, and there's a scholar in residence on April 15th, Friday and Saturday. The Saturday afternoon, wine and cheese at 3 p.m. And you can register in the office. It's free. Also, the Jewish humor course is going, and it's going very nicely. We've got a really good group, and they really are enjoying the humor of it. So you could still join if you like. Okay. For the final blessing, let us join together.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam notah b'tokeinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Blessed is Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who has given us a teaching of truth, implanting within us eternal life. Blessed is Adonai, giver of the Torah. Amen. Okay, everyone, have a wonderful Passover. Be with family and friends, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.